Greetings, MacNNers. It's time once again for the podcast, the most podcast that one can have, episode 54 of the MacNN podcast. Welcome back, MacNNers. Always a pleasure to have you with us. I'm Charles Martin. I'm the editor of MacNN. And joining me this week is my usual guest, and it's always a pleasure to have him, managing editor Mike.
Well, the good news is I'm not nearly as mad as I was last week.
Well, you were quite right to be mad. Oh, what a week.
Oh, no, this week the comedy started.
Yes, we've entered a new cycle in this, the story, the main story. Last week we spent a lot of time on this story. This week we're going to try and spend a tiny bit less, but come on, so much has happened. Oh, yeah, I know, right? Well, that was my hope anyway. We do have some other things to talk about besides Apple versus the FBI, I swear.
Why don't we do that first then, and we'll come back around to Apple versus FBI.
Oh, you know, that's a great idea. Let's do that.
Professionals.
I'll get the music. Hang on. Rumor Roundup. Oh, man. Oh, it's so nice to think about something other than encryption for a minute. Oh, yes, Rumor Roundup. There's more rumors going on. And sadly, by the time you hear this, things will probably have changed somewhat. And the reason I say that is because for weeks, literally weeks, every other website but us was saying there's an Apple event and it's going to happen and it's going to be on March 15th because that's a Tuesday and that's when Apple always does it. And we went, really? The Ides of March when Caesar was stabbed in the back? That seems like a good time to you?
Well, Tim's old, but he's not that old.
Well, but also Apple have, particularly in recent years, not done events on Tuesdays necessarily.
Well, also here's the thing. We are, as we record this, it is late Friday night on the 4th.
That's right.
Did a little checking back. Apple doesn't always have a spring event. In the last 5 years, there's been 3.
Yeah.
So there's been a couple years they skipped, and there's nothing necessarily saying that a new iPhone that isn't, oh my God, it's new, it's fancy, is going to have an event.
Well,
right? If this iPhone SE or 6 SE or whatever you want to call it this week is a 4-inch device that they're just rolling out, I'm not convinced they're going to have an event, or they're just going to splash something up on the webpage one day and say, look, new iPhone, this is what it does.
They have never not announced a new iPhone without a special event, but this being sort of a remix of existing technology, this could be the first, you know? That's what we love about Apple. We can't predict what they're going to do.
The 4K iMac did not have an event.
That's true, because compared to the 5K iMac, well. Speaking of that, shout out to Sanjeev. He reviewed the 4K iMac. I think he called it exactly right. He said it's a stunningly beautiful machine that's hobbled by one stupid decision.
The solution here with the 4K iMac is an external SSD. USB 3 is sufficiently fast if you don't want to pay the Thunderbolt premium for a RAID array or something like that. But yeah, putting in a spinning drive in that machine is kind of sad.
Yeah. Really, they might as well have attached a sewing machine to it and said, well, this is the latest technology. Cosplay is hot. Here you go. I mean, it's funny that we live in a world where somebody says, well, we're bringing out this great new machine and it's got a spinning hard drive in it, and people suddenly go, what? Are you crazy?
Well, yeah, most of the industry, if you look across the board on desktops, there's still hard drives.
Yeah.
So this isn't an unprecedented move, but given what we've come to expect from Apple with the 5K iMac, I can see where this is a disappointment.
I was just mystified, as Sanjeev was, about why not a Fusion drive? That was,
yeah.
You can care or not care for Fusion drives that much, but that seems unnatural for a machine like this.
2.5-inch SSDs are ridiculously, stupidly cheap now. Well, you know, relatively speaking.
Well,
you just get a 128 gig boot drive in an enclosure for less than $100 and you're good to go.
Particularly if you get one with Thunderbolt 2, that'll be super fast.
Well, you're not really future-proof from Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3. Don't forget, Thunderbolt 3, which we are expecting to see in Macs this year, is an entirely different connector. It's the USB-C connector.
Yep.
So, and it's not at all clear, given how the cabling is going to change a little bit, if there are even going to be adapters for Thunderbolt and Thunderbolt 2 peripherals for Thunderbolt 3.
Yes, we could be sailing on the good ship SS Abandonware.
Possibly. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we certainly don't know. We don't have any insider info on that, but somebody will make an adapter. You can bet on that. But whether Apple will or not. But getting back to the rumors.
Yes.
Here's the reason why nobody thinks that's going to happen on March 15th anymore. For those of you who aren't in the press, we'll just tell you. Apple sends out invitations at least 11 days early for these kinds of events. If they were going to have an event, we'd have had the invitation in our hand. Now, guess what didn't show up in our mailbox? And not just us, because we did write the feature thief. We might be off their favorite list.
Yeah, I'm not sure we've been on their favorite list for some time, but that's okay.
We may even be cut out of the will. But nobody else, none of our other friendly competitors got that invitation. Nobody did. And thus, we know. And we knew March 1st that this wasn't going to happen. So now, naturally, they just push it forward until the following Monday. What? Suddenly Tuesday's not good enough anymore. So now it's Monday, March 21st. For sure, the date. For sure, in air quotes. Valley Girl, for sure, in air quotes. That's how much faith we have in it.
Well, I'm not opposed to them having an event, but I'm not sold that they're going to have one. The products are old enough in their lifespan that if it's nothing major, there's no compelling reason to even have a media event.
The thing that is bugging me about this, two things. One is that it is much more common for Apple to announce some new stuff just before the Worldwide Developers Conference in June, i.e. May. So sometime in May would make much more sense for this kind of thing. And the second thing is March 21st is a week or so before the end of that quarter. That's not to say Apple doesn't do this all the time. They often do it with iPhones. But, this is an opportunity where they don't have to do it with only 1 week of sales at the end of the quarter.
They also did warn in the last financials that this quarter was going to be challenging. And if they're looking at releasing a new product, even 1 week sales of a brand new product could significantly affect the bottom line. So who knows? Apple's going to do what Apple's going to do. Right now, I'm throwing in my lot for no event and just a release.
Okay, that's a very good position to take. It's a very solid one, but I'm going to throw my lot in with Yes event. Remember, this isn't just about the iPhone whatever, the 4-inch iPhone. This is about the iPad Air 3, which is now going to be an iPad Pro, maybe.
Well, that's also the 7th iteration of the product.
This is the thing. The reason we run this rumor roundup, it all comes back to what I'm about to say, is that we want readers to be more aware of how these things evolve. It's not that we think that everything we've been talking about isn't going to happen or is just fake or made up. There's usually, where there is smoke, there is often fire, as the old saying goes. But we want you to see how these rumors evolve and why it is so difficult to actually pin it down. Even, the great Ming-Chi Kuo. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
I hope you're not.
How about Ming the Merciless Chi Kuo? How's that?
Okay, I'll go with that.
Who has a pretty good track record about features that are going to appear. Although a lot of people say that's just educated guessing. Never mind. He's got a track record and it's not the worst. Let's put it that way. Gene Munster. But he often gets the dates or the exact details quite a bit wrong. He didn't get the memo. He's still calling it the iPhone 5 SE. I feel so bad for him.
Here's the thing about Ming-Chi Kuo, or whatever his name is. You buy a company, the technology is going to show up in a phone. You keep saying it's coming in the next one until you get it right.
Yeah. You just keep...
He's got no magic secret source. These are just educated guesses. I'm in the educated guess category in this, that he just gleans from companies that get purchased. There's nothing more magical than that. And you talking about the evolution of a rumor. The rumor starts and then it keeps on getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back until someone can say, oh, hey, we predicted this 18 months ago.
Yeah. And then they haul out the old saw production problems. Oh, that was the issue. Mm-hmm. When March 21st comes and goes and there's nothing, which I believe is going to happen. Of course, you're listening to this on Monday or Tuesday and I'll already be wrong. But when that date comes and goes and if there isn't anything, I guarantee you it'll be sources in China say production problems. Because they always do.
Because Apple's never made a 4-inch phone before.
Yeah, it's not like they're not selling one right now.
So
That was very, very popular. Anyway, but the thing about this is people forget this by the time the event actually happens because the rumor has evolved so much. But this whole thing, the entire event that we're supposedly going to have, started up because Apple was going to announce an all-new hardware Apple Watch. And everybody's forgotten about that now, but that was the entire genesis of this. That was going to be the announcement, not the iPhone, not the iPad, whatever. It was a watch, an all-new watch. Now they're saying, no, it's just some bands. That's how far we came with that rumor.
I think we're going to go another year without a new Apple Watch version. I think we're not going to see one this year. Not even for Christmas.
Yeah, not even for Christmas. I completely agree with you. Now, of course, after they walked back this whole new Apple Watch thing, they said, oh, no, we meant September. We meant September. It'll be out in September because they thought about it for 2 seconds and realized that if Apple was going to put out a new watch, it would be for Christmas. Duh.
Yep.
So then they walked it over to September. Okay, fine. But my gut tells me no.
Should we talk about my experience with the Apple Watch now since we're talking about it and why I think there's not going to be one this year?
Oh, yes, that's right. Sure, because in particular, I'd like to get some of your impressions on the Apple Watch. You've had it, about a week?
I've had it this week.
Okay. Yes, Mike, the ultimate Apple Watch cynic, as regular listeners of this podcast will know, has joined the crowd. One of us.
Yeah.
But let's find out if he's going to be a traitor, just like in that Freaks movie.
No.
Hang on. Music. So Mike meets the Apple Watch.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, let's get into it. Okay, tell us all about it and what in God's name was going through your mind when you got a white band. Go on.
Well, I don't have a white band anymore.
Oh.
The white band is gone. I have a third-party Milanese now.
Oh, right.
I wanted to like it. I've always wanted to like it. The concept is cool. However, even though it does what it says it's supposed to do, even though it's got the activity tracking and the notifications on my wrist, et cetera, I don't gallivant.
Yeah.
I periodically go out and get some errands done or something like that. But here's how this works. The watch is an extension of your phone, right? That's not how I roll. How I roll is I use my phone as an extension of my computer. So the abilities that the watch has, the phone already has for me. So there's no compelling reason for me to constantly be wearing the watch around. And I'm going to give it more time. But the product is successful. The watch iOS 2.1 is very mature. The watch actually came with watch iOS 1 on it.
Huh?
Okay, so I got to use that.
Well, that's what you get for buying it out of the trunk of a car.
I know, right? Well, that's what you get for buying refurb sometimes.
The Woot van came to your neighborhood.
Well, it was clearly an Apple refurbished product. It wasn't, Larry's refurb service or anything like that. It was clearly an Apple refurb product. Want to like it. It's not exactly what I need. And, the irony of the fact that the Retina display in the watch has a higher resolution than my original Mac is not lost on me.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, though. In a work chat conversation, you mentioned to me that your phone traditionally sits on a surface when you're working. Your phone is usually nearby, and it sits on a surface in such a way that it vibrates or buzzes when you get an incoming message.
It does, in fact, and astute listeners of the podcast may have actually heard this before.
And so, therefore, that tapping that I get when I'm being signaled that a VIP email or message like from you has come in. So that's kind of nullified by the fact that you have essentially haptic feedback already.
Yeah, my workspace is, I can't remember the exact IKEA system it is, but I've haberdashed something together with one of their storage systems, and I like it a great deal. But as a result, it's kind of an echo chamber.
Oh, right.
When the phone makes the noise, because I just got a message from the haptic motor in the phone vibrating, it's pretty clear. I get that even before I get my notification on the desktop.
Right. And you make a very interesting point that people who move around a lot are going to get more out of the watch than people who don't for work purposes.
I think that if I had a more mobile lifestyle, I think that if I spent more time on the DC Metro and things of that nature, I think the watch would do me more good. At the same time, my sister-in-law got a watch because we've been having problems with her not getting her messages until 6 or 7 hours later.
Oh,
And on the other hand, she is now much more responsive to messages because she wears it on her wrist and her phone may be across her office and she may not be in a position to go grab it, but we know she's got the message.
Right. Let me ask you this, though. The health aspects, the fitness tracking and all that sort of business, have you used that much at all? Do you think you will?
I've used it the first couple of days, and I realized that given my ups and downs, just because of my lifestyle and my children and my family and everything I need to do around the house on any given day, including work, I fill those bands no problem.
You can set higher goals for them, though.
Okay, and I did, and I filled them no problem.
Uh-oh.
So, well, you got to realize my kid's bus stop is 3/4 of a mile away.
Oh, wow.
So in the morning, I'm already putting 1.5 miles on my bod.
Yeah.
So, and the phone can adequately keep track of this.
Well, that's what I like. As I've mentioned on the podcast before, after wearing the watch, I discovered that I have a lower than average heartbeat. Did I mention that?
You did.
Yeah, I did. What's funny is, as I mentioned last week, now that I'm drinking more coffee, it's gone up a bit.
I think that not the next iteration of the watch, but the one after that will be interesting for sensors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the next iteration of the watch will be, and now it's thinner.
Yeah. Or battery life is better or something.
And the one after that will be, and now we have all these additional sensors. And oh, yeah, by the way, the FDA has authorized a medical observation device.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be nice.
Because they're very careful not to make claims about the health benefits of the watch other than people are changing their lives with the help of the watch.
Yeah.
That's because they just don't have the FDA certification for it as a medical device.
Right.
So Research Kit kind of skirts that a little bit, but that's a topic for a different day. And I think that not the next iteration, but the one after that will have all of these FDA approvals, and that will be Apple's genuine implementation of the watch.
But that's probably quite a few years away.
I'm guessing that's 4 or 5 years away.
Yeah.
I don't think that the watch is going to be replaced every year. I think it's going to be, instead of an every 1 year cycle like we've got with other iOS devices, I think this is going to be every 2 or 3.
And again, that's where the whole Apple Watch 2 is coming out in March thing started, was because March is almost the 1 year anniversary of the Apple Watch. And we talked a little bit about this last week, but even so, even if for a 1.0 product, this has been remarkably successful, actually. And what it has opened up, so I can see exactly why Apple was so excited about it. It has opened up a lot. It's really made their customers think differently. And of course, that is one of the things they love to do. So I would still call it a success, but I really like the fact that you are making a case that it's not for everybody.
Yeah, it's not. It's a solid product. I like the future of it. It just doesn't fit into my lifestyle. It just doesn't.
But now that you're sister-in-law and you have them, are you sending each other heartbeats?
Oh, good Lord, no.
Little drawings?
Nope.
Oh, see, I only have William to do that with.
Well, I'm pretty sure Amber is going to start hassling me with that before not very
Yay!
long. So.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, the iPhone SE or whatever it's going to be called, maybe, if Apple is actually making this thing, and remember, we've seen very, very little in the way of what we feel like are legitimate parts leaks, or, I mean, the most solid evidence we have is a schematic.
No, and there's a screen photo floating around, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily from a new phone.
Yeah, remember, Apple still sells a 4-inch display iPhone right now.
It's a phone display that is remarkably similar to the existing display, but without 3D touch.
Yeah.
Which is no different than a 5S screen.
Well, and this is the thing, is let's say Apple brings out a 4-inch iPhone and it doesn't have all the features of the iPhone 6S, there are going to be people who are going to be mad.
Well, I don't think it will.
Well, it couldn't, could it?
If any of the pricing is correct, I think 3D touch is going to get left off. I think it's going to be an A8, not an A9.
Right.
And I think that
probably less RAM.
There's going to be a lot of hue and cry about this. But
yeah,
being that Apple has established the A8 processor as this is your target with the Apple TV 4th generation and the new iPod Touch, I think that we can count on the SE being an A8 processor.
The main thing that's pushing me to the idea that Apple is in fact going to come out with a 4-inch remixed iPhone, let's call it a Frankenphone or whatever you want to call it, is the fact that they discontinued the 4-inch models that they were selling in India. And that suggests that they have a different idea for how to attract buyers on the lower end, which is exactly why they were still making the iPhone 4S.
For the longest time.
Yeah, for India and Japan. And they made them in Brazil. That's just how global everything is now. But anyway, so I think that they have something up their sleeve. They have a new idea about how to attract more buyers in developing markets. What exactly that is, though, is still not very clear. It is not outside the realm of possibility that Apple could make a 4-inch iPhone exactly as the rumors have specified and not sell it in the U.S. It could be strictly for developing markets.
Which would certainly obviate the need for them to do a media event.
Exactly. Well, a media event in the United States anyway. That would make no sense.
Yeah.
The other thing that has been talked about is a 9.7-inch iPad Air 3 originally, because they didn't do one in October. But now, at least a rational reason for why has come out, and that is that Apple's reconsidered that and decided to make the 9.7-inch iPad, which would have normally been called the Air 3, into an iPad Pro something. iPad Air Pro? iPad Pro Air?
Yeah, that seems like a really bad idea to me, but that's okay. What they should have done all along is instead of first generation, second generation, third generation, is iPad 2010.
Now that's just Microsoft talking.
iPad early 2014. No, that's MacBook Pros talking.
Well, I mean, that is exactly the way they talk about MacBooks. You're exactly right, particularly ones they haven't changed the design on in years.
You know, this iPad Air, iPad mini, okay, I'll give you that. iPad Pro, yeah, the goddamn thing is huge.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's call it the iPad Pro. And
yeah,
come on.
But you can't call this the iPad Pro Mini if it exists.
Well, then don't.
Yeah.
Call it the freaking iPad early 2000, and get on with your life.
But it does certainly make sense for them to have a second device that can support the Apple Pencil.
Yeah, but you don't need to call it the Pro to do it.
No, I mean, not everybody wants to reach that price point. And frankly, I think if this is a 9.7-inch iPad Pro-like device that we're talking about, that's going to put a nail in the Surface's coffin. Maybe not kill it outright, but it's definitely going to wound them.
I don't think so. I think the people looking at the Surface versus the people looking at iPad, I think there's a sizable amount of people that have both, for one.
Yeah.
And I also think that the markets aren't exactly the same. I mean, everyone says that the tablet market, but it's varied and uses range an entire span of use cases, even amongst our staff.
Yeah, that's true.
You and William are creators on the iPad. I'm a consumer on the iPad.
Right. I'm absolutely positive there will always be an iPad that doesn't have pencil support that will eventually gain 3D touch that will be for consumers mostly.
Yeah, but then we're in Ming Cho Kuo territory. I think that eventually the entire line will support pencil. It'll take a couple of years.
Well, that's true. It is an optional accessory, so even if it has that ability, you don't need it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you have to go out and buy a pencil.
Right.
So, yeah, you may be right. Last but not least about this, as if there isn't enough to talk about, some iPhone 7 rumors have started coming down the pike. Here they come. The dual camera one is a perfect example of a rumor that makes great sense because the company, Apple, did in fact buy a company that developed that technology.
And a very similar technology is in the Galaxy S7.
Right, exactly. Although, ironically, Apple will look to be copying the Galaxy S7 somehow. But there you go.
No, I mean, that's typical Samsung product release.
Yeah.
Oh, Apple's going to have dual camera. Well, okay, we're going to do it first.
Yeah, we're going to do it first.
They did it with the Gear. And when was the last time we heard anything about the Samsung Galaxy Gear?
It hasn't, this strategy hasn't worked out well for them. It just isn't. The other thing that the people are already saying about the iPhone 7 is, and again, very educated guess sort of business, that it will feature an A10 chip.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not difficult to figure out. The part that's interesting, though, is that the rumor says that the A10 will be the first chip not produced at all by Samsung.
We've heard this for 3 years.
Yeah, we have heard this for 3 years. But to be fair, Apple has been reducing incrementally their business with Samsung in this area. So, they have been, as we talked about last week, they have been cultivating other suppliers for it. And it is currently indistinguishable. If you own an iPhone 6S or a 6S Plus, then you don't know where the processor in it came from and probably don't care at all.
Yep.
Some of them came from Samsung. Some of them didn't. So, it's entirely possible. This is, again, just educated guessing. It's entirely possible that the next chip won't be by Samsung. It is a part of an ongoing campaign by Apple to, I wouldn't say punish Samsung because this particular division did nothing wrong. But it is, I think, move on their part to make sure they're not too dependent on any one supplier.
I agree. I think this is less, I don't think they're ever going to completely get away from Samsung, if for no other reason than flash media.
Yeah, right. I mean, there will still be some Samsung parts in here. it has to be said, Samsung's fabrication abilities are world class.
Yeah, it's not like Apple taking business away from Samsung is going to bankrupt them or anything like that. So
no,
this is mostly symbolic, and I think the enthusiasts are more excited about less Samsung than Apple is. I don't think Apple cares.
Just to give you an example of that, in Austin, Texas, there is an Apple R&D facility that works on the design of the chips, and Samsung built a facility next door.
Yep.
And the reason for that is so that the two could collaborate. Now, admittedly, maybe things have changed, but that was the purpose. And that building is still there, and those Samsung people are still there, and Apple people are still there. I imagine they're still having a lot of very friendly meetings.
No, I'm not sure the engineers care that round 4 of Apple versus Samsung is about to begin in the courts.
Oh, God. Oh, let's not even talk about that this week. It makes me weak. Oh, yeah. The 4th juried trial between Apple and Samsung is coming up. We'll talk more.
Yes, it is. Motions were heard yesterday.
Yeah, we'll talk a little more about it next week. But first, Mike, I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
You ran a story on Friday about Alexa, about Amazon's voice technology and a couple of products, new products that have just come out. That technology is expanding. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, the new Alexa products, there are extensions of the Amazon Echo. There is the Echo Dot, which is interesting, and we'll discuss it in a minute. Then there's the Tap. The Tap, you should think of that as a portable Bluetooth speaker. It's got a battery where the regular Amazon products don't. The Dot is a smaller device, which, if you remember the old Airport Express, and actually the current Airport Express, you can use as an audio source. This is the kind of thing that they're looking at for the Dot. But interestingly, the Dot, you can only order through Amazon Voice Shopping right now. So you have to have a Fire TV or an existing Alexa product to order it.
Oh, I see.
Minimal quantities. They're both interesting products. They're both the Amazonification of your home. They're both Alexa, order me 10,000 Pop-Tarts kind of products.
Have you broken into Paula Poundstone's home because she does that?
Not to the best of my knowledge, I haven't. And the pricing is good. The pricing is less than the main Alexa product, and that's fine. But I'm concerned in conjunction with this news that with the Fire OS 5, they have decided to strip all device encryption out of the stock Android that it's based on. Now, if for those of you not familiar with Fire OS 5, the current version of the OS for the Kindle Fire line, is based on Android 5.0. Android 5.0 has whole device encryption baked into it.
That's right.
So they actually took effort to remove that functionality from the OS, saying that, well, none of you used it, so we took it out because it's an enterprise feature. Not really that excited about that.
It just sounds bad right now for some reason, to say, oh, we're not encrypting anymore. We did, and now we're not.
To be fair, the communications back and forth from Amazon servers are still encrypted.
Okay.
But the whole device encryption that they used to have,
right,
meaning that similar protection when your iOS device can't be unlocked, they just don't exist anymore. It's trivial now if you have physical custody of the device to get the data off, even if you don't have the user password.
Can see why they wanted to make that quiet, though, in light of all that's going on. But
hell of a week for the internet to have discovered it.
This reminds me of something, and that is that the whole encryption, security, privacy debate that the country is having right now is just as relevant to Android devices. But when at all have you heard Android mentioned in any of these innumerable hearings that Congress has done, in general debates about this? It's always Apple. And to be fair, Apple does sell incredibly well in the United States. Almost, I think it is just about, but not quite, better than all of Android combined in the United States. But worldwide, Android is the larger system. And so that they don't get a dog whistle out of anybody in this entire discussion probably delights them no end. But it is concerning, and it really reflects how influential Apple has been.
Let's play the music and just go ahead and roll into this.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, here we go. So, yeah. What a week. Oh my God. We're now into our third week.
We just finished our second week. We're starting our third week.
Okay, you're right. The whole thing started on February 16th. That's when it all blew up. The magistrate judge ordered Apple to assist the FBI come hell or high water. And Apple said no. and challenged it, and as they have a perfect legal right to do. And that's where the whole thing blew up. But now it has spread to Congress. It has spread to presidential candidates. Talk radio's all over it. Everybody is talking about it. If it weren't an election year, this would be the story. And, of course, from a tech perspective, it is the story.
Yeah, we still got a little bit of time left on the presidential thing, but right now and for the foreseeable future, there's going to be a lot of column inches slaughtered at the expense of this.
Yeah.
You think the magistrate judge who made this ruling is reconsidering it now just based on the colossal storm that it started?
The fact that she pushed back the hearing, originally Apple was only going to have a few days to be able to respond to this, and now it has been pushed back, almost a full month from when the original deadline, suggests to me that yes. Yeah,
she gave Apple 5 days.
Well,
originally.
Walking this back a little bit, the court hearing in which this judge decided to acquiesce to the FBI and order Apple to assist them took place without Apple's participation. So they didn't have an opportunity to respond at the time. And to be fair to this judge, because we don't know exactly what she was thinking about it, but possibly because she was only listening to the FBI side of the story, the larger ramifications and implications of the principles upon which this decision has opened up may not have been obvious to her at the time. And so, yes, I think that now that there's been a discussion going, I think the judge is helping foster that discussion by putting that decision off. And yeah, if she thought she was just going to get a response from Apple and that was going to be the extent of the paperwork and the rehearing, no.
Yeah, let me just go over some observations from this week, because I'm the guy who did the live coverage of the C-SPAN hearing on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I want to talk a little more about that, but go ahead, please.
James Comey, the FBI head, has obviously clearly talked to PR people since his initial fumbling last week.
Yes, and they have told him, be nice.
Clearly, he was way more polished. He was way more polite about it. Instead of saying, you will comply, he was like, okay, well, let's start the conversation about it.
Yeah.
And he actually decided that he wanted to be a little reconciliatory about it. He said that encryption is good, and here's why, but encryption is bad, and here's why. They scored some points on this. He did score some points on the concept of a warrantless space.
Yeah.
Which is, it was eyebrow-raising when he first said it, but then he got torn down by the encryption person.
Oh, you mean Professor Landau?
Professor Landau just tore him down on that, saying that basically you have only yourself to blame because you haven't kept up with this.
Yeah.
And talking about how the NSA doesn't share their secrets.
I think she said something along the lines of 20th century methodologies and mindsets.
In a 21st century world.
Trying to tackle a 21st century problem, yes.
There was a stunning amount of bad analogies put forth at the hearing, which bothers me so much.
Oh, yes, there were.
Back to bad analogies for things. There is no analogy to be drawn. This is not a safe. This is not a physical object that can be mechanically penetrated to break into. This is not a house in a neighborhood that you're ordering the locksmith to make a key for all of the locks in the neighborhood. It is nothing like that.
Yeah.
And they talk about how Apple could take the phone, and they talk about how they can de-chip the phone.
Yeah.
There's a lot of what ifs that were being spun that seem like they came more out of Hollywood than they actually came from real life. And yes, I know de-chipping is a thing, and I know that cloning devices is a thing. I understand that.
Oh, yeah. We know it very well. But yeah, it's always fun to hear people who clearly are not that technical themselves personally, but obviously have a nerd on staff, who then recite, well, why didn't you do this? Because I saw it in a sci-fi movie once.
Well, the problem is they have a nerd on staff, but they only listen to every fourth word.
I know. But you know what fascinated me? Now, we are talking specifically about the House Judiciary Committee's hearing, which was televised on C-SPAN. There are other hearings, and I don't want to confuse listeners too much because the Intelligence Committee and the Commerce Committee are all going to weigh on this, or have. But the one we're talking about was the one that was broadcast on C-SPAN 3. And if you have the time, and it is quite long, but you could...
It's 5 hours, man.
You've got a fast-forward button, too. Once you start hearing people repeat themselves, just zzz through it until the new witnesses turn up and you'll be fine. But anyway, the hearing is worth seeing because one of the things that really struck me about this, especially in an election year where America seems very, very divided and very black and white on a lot of stuff, the Congress people in these committees are very black and white on a lot of this stuff. But they brought up challenging questions that Comey and others had to answer. Even with their tortured theoreticals and analysis and, comparatives, they still brought up things that Americans were thinking. Like, what if this wasn't about a workplace massacre and was instead about nuclear codes? That is something that people think about. And in some cases, I think they really pushed both the Apple representative and the FBI representative to talk about areas where they have not they couldn't just rely on their talking points. They had to come up with an answer on the spot. I commend, in particular, this was even called out during the hearing, even these Congress people who hear from Director Comey of the FBI all the time on various different matters, noted that he was being much more forthcoming than usual.
I did note that, yeah. I read over a couple of transcripts to see, and he is not typically that straightforward when he's answering their questions. There
were two things that fascinated me. Number one was I got to hear the director of the FBI say, "I don't know about something." What?
You know what? He got a lot of heat for that, but I have absolutely zero problem with that.
Right. He doesn't know. And one question in particular about a complicated, you haven't tried this weirdo process. And he said, look, I'm not a chip engineer, so I don't know, but I'll talk to them about it.
Well, yeah, let me give you an example where that's okay. As our regular readership knows, I was a reactor chemist in the submarine fleet in the 90s, and I knew at any given moment what my water chemistry, my pH was, and conductivities were, and other assorted stats on our plant's water.
Right.
The captain didn't necessarily know these numbers.
Right.
I mean, sometimes he did because he still got the results from the samples because, nuclear power and all that.
But he gets the summary. You're the guy who does it minute by minute. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. It's exactly the same thing. And that's why I had zero problem with that.
No, I agree. So, it was kind of refreshing to see people, and Bruce Sewell from Apple had to do the same thing because he got thrown a couple of boomerangs, he wasn't quite clear on. And then when it was clarified for him, he go, well, I don't know. And so, it was, let me put it this way. It may not have been the American government's finest hour, but it was not their worst hour or 5 hours.
Yeah, we've heard much worse from this committee.
Yes.
Much more random from this committee.
Yeah.
As a general rule, I was pleased with the tenor of the discussion. I was far less pleased with the attachment or the lack of attachment that the senators had to the issue as a whole.
The other thing that struck me was, I'm just going to call it out. When the Republican from Texas was called on, I was expecting, Republican from Texas. And I didn't get it.
No, yeah.
I got something completely different. There was some Democrats on this committee that asked really, really angry, I think is the word I want, questions to Apple, right? So the usual lines of, the Republicans line up with the FBI and the Democrats line up with Apple just did not apply at all here.
And that's how this should work.
That's exactly how this should work.
That's how the system is supposed to work.
Exactly. So even though there were times where, the Congress people would ask dumb questions, or the respondents, both from Apple and the FBI, they fall back on their talking points when they can, right?
Yeah. The district attorney from New York, he got hammered.
Oh,
so many times.
Yes. The New York County District Attorney, Cyrus Vance, who ironically has just lost the case for the FBI. And also, he cannot be their favorite person because he was the one who broke their claim that they just wanted to use it for this one case. He went, oh, no. You guys win. I am going to court for that.
Yeah, I'm totally getting all my 170 phones, which is now 204, unlocked.
Oops. He blew apart a key part of the FBI's claims, from early on. And then he goes and, just tries to repeat the talking points as much as possible. Let me put it this way. If he was a Republican candidate for president, he'd be out now.
So it's just, I wrote an editorial about this today in conjunction with a couple other things. And
yes, you did.
I usually write an editorial and Charles will say, no, let's get this off 11. But I expressly forbade him from doing so today.
Well, also, I liked every point you made. So it's funny because as regular listeners know, Mike and I are not worlds apart politically, but we are different politically. And yet I found a lot of common ground in here, boy. Mm-hmm.
The situation that I'm having problems with is the Emancipation Proclamation. This has the import of many things that have happened in American politics over the last 200 years. This is the New Deal. This is so important for the future that this gets resolved and resolved properly.
Yeah, exactly. I particularly liked your last line. My point of view of this is not because I'm Democrat or Republican or because I'm an Apple fan or a Google fan. It's because I'm American and I'm concerned about civil liberties and privacy being backslid over theoretical security issues.
Yeah, trying to reach a benchmark we'll never get.
Yeah.
The example of, well, what if there are a location of a nuclear device stored on the phone? The fact is, if we know that there's a nuclear device stored on a phone, then we have other avenues.
Yeah, and other problems.
and other problems. While I am, on one hand, surprised at the level of knowledge that some of the Congress people showed, I am utterly dismayed at the lack of knowledge that the vast majority have shown.
Yeah.
And these are the people that will be making the decisions for us. This is not going to come up for a public vote. This is not going to be a public referendum. This is going to be decided in Washington, D.C.
Well, yes, either by the courts or by Congress, and that's starting to become a fight of its own, actually, interestingly. One of the Congress people actually said to Apple, you are not going to like what comes out of Congress on this.
My concern is exactly that.
Yeah.
My concern is that Apple, I think that their court situation is going to be resolved. I think there are enough constitutional issues and questions.
Oh, yeah.
That somewhere along the line, somebody's going to say, no, there's enough precedent here. We can't force this situation.
Right.
But my concern is Congress. My concern is them saying, well, freedom is about security and security is about knowing what everyone is doing all the time. So yes, make the tool.
And this being an election year doesn't help anything. That's the other issue.
Well, this is bipartisan nonsense, though. This is from both sides of the aisle. There's ridiculousness coming out of people's mouths about
Oh,
this.
yes.
This is not just Trump spewing pablum. This is also the White House spraying the same crap all over the wall.
It's true. And now the crazy is starting to leak out. Remember the FBI said, well, if they develop a tool, it'll never get out. I think we've proven that that's not true. As far away as France, Crazy Town is dialing it in and talking it up on talk radio right now.
Yeah, in one day we had 3 events. We had the beginnings of a French law talking about how CEOs of companies can be jailed if they don't give up encrypted information. We have one of our crazier congressmen floating a law saying that the feds won't buy Apple hardware. So yes, let's buy less secure hardware for the federal government. Yeah, let's do that. And we had the DA from San Bernardino, which San Bernardino itself is walking away from, saying, this is my favorite quote of the week.
Yeah.
This was almost as good as the lawyer who was suing Apple because he lost his data, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, remember that guy? Oh.
What I know, good times, right? That there is a dormant cyber pathogen lurking on the iPhone 5C, which will lay waste to the infrastructure of San Bernardino.
Yeah, on this guy's work phone. Yes, that's...
I saw that last night. It was late on the East Coast, and just by luck of the draw, Charles was awake and functional because he had done some gallivanting that day.
I did.
And
I cross borders, people. I do it.
And I was getting the kids were down. I was getting ready to wind down for the night because, we don't just work here. We're married to the job.
Yeah, we don't clock out at 4 or whatever.
And at 11 o'clock, I send Charles a frantic 11 o'clock Eastern. He's Pacific time. 11 o'clock Eastern, I send Charles a frantic message saying, are you at the keys? You need to write about this and do it now.
Yeah, and so I did. Like you said, that was not the end of the crazy. It's been going on. This Florida Republican, Mr. Jolly, this is the part that boggles my mind. He was very aggressive towards Apple during the committee meeting.
Oh, was he ever? Yeah.
But he was there when they said, and when the FBI director said, well, Apple's actually been terribly helpful up to this point. They've done everything they can do. Even the FBI director felt he needed to defend Apple's role in this.
Oh, and you know what? I can see him in American flag hat. I can see him in American flag bathrobe and waving the flag over his head saying Apple's not cooperating and they're in league with the terrorists. Yeah. I can see it coming.
And yet after hearing with his own ears, Director Comey of the FBI saying, no, there's no demons here. Apple's not being bad. We just have this disagreement. It's something adults do. That's all right. Mom and dad still love each other. This guy then goes out the next day and files a bill demanding that the government stop buying Apple products.
Yeah, and you know what? He can. It is perfectly within his right to do so. I guarantee you he hasn't asked his constituency about it, but I also guarantee he hasn't considered the implications of that.
Yeah. Exactly. As a number of other people have said, this would mean buying less secure hardware. That's what you want? Let's look at your phone. Let's see what's on that. But also, as you mentioned, what's interesting is that the tech community always comes up with some really great answers. When the San Bernardino County DA claimed that there was a cyber pathogen.
Yeah, I love that.
No, a lying, dormant cyber pathogen. So a dishonest, sleeping, what? Cyber pathogen.
Oh, well, we have one of our commenters, I forget, I regret to inform you, I don't remember who it is, had mentioned that it was just laden with typos and grammar problems, and it was. I mean,
too.
Was there no one in the building when he drafted this?
Well, more than that, it makes you, I don't want to get too political about this, but I got to say this. The individual who wrote this brief was Gary Fagan, who's the deputy district attorney. I don't want to falsely blame San Bernardino County DA Michael Rosa when it was in fact not him. But more importantly than that, this makes me question, I mean, if he just decides he wants to make things up in court briefs, does he do that in other cases?
Yeah.
Is this standard working procedure for him?
Yeah, he just winging this kind of thing and making up terms. I'm not comfortable with the level of knowledge that, and again, this is what the editorial is about, and I spoke very harshly about this. I am not comfortable, like with the Aereo case in the Supreme Court, I am not comfortable that the government and this court system are, I'm not going to say intellectually prepared because I think they have the smarts to deal with it. I don't think that they have the will to delve into the technical minutia of the case, and I think they have to.
Yeah, and this guy clearly didn't at all. In fact, a fellow that we've been following closely, whose name I cannot pronounce, but I will give it a try anyway.
I think Zdarsky is who you're talking about.
Zdarsky is what I'm going to go with, and I hope I'm right. You're invited on the show if we've gotten your name right.
Even if we haven't, you're invited on the show.
Even if we haven't. But anyway, Jonathan Zdarsky has been writing about this case a lot. He is a forensic scientist. His job is to crack open phones. He is a reverse engineer. That's his job. And when he heard the term cyber pathogen, he started a Google search for it or some kind of search for it and discovered that, as far as he could tell, the main origin of that term, it hasn't even appeared in sci-fi novels.
Yeah, it's right here, right now.
Came from Harry Potter fan fiction.
Nice. Nice. I hadn't read that. That's classy.
It's amazing. My mind just exploded when I heard
That's
about
really cool.
But yeah, he said that essentially what the San Bernardino County DA's office was telling the court was that there could be a magical unicorn on this phone, so you have to open it up.
Basically, yeah. Well, that's what this whole thing is predicated around.
Yeah.
That there is a magical unicorn for the case itself, for the investigators, for Homeland Security, or for the FBI, that there's some kind of magical unicorn on this phone. And the problem is cell phone smashed, county-owned 5C with enterprise management software on it, not smashed.
Yeah. This was a point brought up by one of the victim's husbands. Luckily, we're talking about a victim who survived, but was injured in the shooting. So we're very happy about that. But her husband wrote a brief for the court and brought up exactly that point and also said, look, I'm an employee of San Bernardino County Health Department. Farouk was also an employee of, my wife is also an employee. We know how the county managed its phones, and I'm here to tell you, there's nothing on there.
And again, in the editorial, I point this out as well. The county does have sufficient licenses and the software to have been able to crack this phone open themselves, had they properly provisioned the phones. How come no one is really talking about that?
Yeah. If you're on the FBI side on this and you own a business and you issue iPhones, you should be looking into your mobile device management software. This is where you can be of the greatest assistance to this country. The other thing that boggles my mind about this is that the FBI actually cobbled their own case.
Yeah, we talked about this last week a bit.
Yeah. You know, there's the other thing is that although Mike had actually brought up a wonderful point about that this isn't as much of a Fourth Amendment problem as I had originally assessed it as, because San Bernardino County always owned this phone and is always going to cooperate with law enforcement to the extent that it can. It is still a constitutional issue. It's Fifth Amendment problems and First Amendment problems rather than Fourth. But nevertheless, it is still raising, that's the problem here, is it's not just a simple, oh, well, we should be able to get into that iPhone if we want to. It raises larger issues, and that's really where this is going to go, and it's going to be long. That's the other problem.
Yeah, here's the deal, and I'm putting this out here right now, and at some point we're going to put it on the website. If you or your organization needs some form of training on what the FBI could have done in a completely apolitical fashion, get in touch with us, and we'll make it happen. It's not necessarily going to be free, mind you. Okay, let's be clear about that. I'm not offering to fly all over the world and talk to everyone about this pro bono. That's not how this is going to go. But if you want some education on this matter, let's start talking about it.
Yeah, and if there's something that you want that we don't know, we will tell you how to find it.
Yeah, related to the federal officials maybe not having the correct mindset in investigating this, I don't understand how mainstream media just figured out during the hearing that, oh God, the FBI botched the investigation. That was known how many days prior?
Well, it's that Director Comey had not called it a mistake until that day.
Yeah.
That was the thing. That was a change in the language. That's what they're looking for all the time.
Well, us and all of our colleagues at Apple Insider and 9 to 5.
Yeah, all the rest
we all
of it.
said, well, they changed the iCloud password. So they hosed themselves with the connection with the phone.
Right.
Where everyone else was talking about, well, they tried to reset the password on the phone. No, that's not what happened. They reset the iCloud password. So the phone with the iCloud password on it, the old iCloud password on it,
Yep.
not so helpful. They clearly did not talk to anyone at Apple before they tried to do that. And we knew this a couple of days after the fact.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about a lot of venues on this.
I can only imagine what the Apple engineers said when they found out.
Oh, I have some pretty colorful metaphors in mind.
I imagine you're right. So, as I've mentioned before, this case is so weak for what it is the FBI is trying to accomplish. I mean, if it's decided by the courts, I can tell you how this is going to go.
Yeah.
Even if the FBI manages to find some fairly conservative judges or people that they think would be sympathetic to their cause, I don't think that's going to go their way. Congress is more malleable, especially right at the moment.
I'm concerned about Congress. I'm deeply, deeply concerned about what Congress will decide to do on this for legislation.
Yeah. My only comfort point is that this will probably take longer than November, so we'll be out of the election season.
Yeah, we are. There are conversations in the tech world that take years to go through. One of them is Samsung versus Apple court hearings. We have literally been dealing with them since I started this job 4 years ago.
Yep.
4 years ago.
And before that, actually.
And MacNN was covering it at least a year before I came on board.
Yeah, it all started really in 2011, so it's been 5 years, almost 5 years.
So this is going to be another of those things that you're going to be hearing about this for the next 2 or 3 years and perhaps longer.
Yeah. Also, I don't want to speak ill of Congress. They already have a low enough approval rating as it is. But I will say that this is not a black and white or easy question. This was brought up a lot at the hearing, and I'm glad that, the hearing, for all the fun we've been making of certain elements of it, it was mostly a conversation of adults.
It was, mostly, yeah.
So this is a complex issue, and it's going to take some time to resolve, but I hope that if you don't get anything else out of this, that you now understand that your representatives in Congress are at least as important as who's president. And again, I know I'm going to keep harping on this, but register, please. Vote, please. Whatever party you like, whatever candidate you like. But clearly, this is a perfect example. This hearing, if you watch that video, you will see how important it is to have somebody representing your view in Congress.
Yep.
And as we usually do towards the end of the podcast, we'd like to invite William Gallagher to come out of his hidey hole and tell us about his app of the week. And this one is a doozy. William, what is your app of the week?
I most definitely have an app of the week this week, but I'm slightly embarrassed about it because if I were sensible, all of this app would be the reason for it being app of the week. It's an update with so many new features in it, and all of them, it seems to me, very clever and very interesting. And yet I'm only obsessed with one tiny bit of it. The app is Drafts 4.6. Now, it's a note-taking app. It's more than that, really, but I use it as a note-taking app, and what I've always adored is I actually just enjoy typing in it. There is something about it on iPad and iPhone. I enjoy writing in this app. But if I want to be really specific, I'd say what I particularly like is when I get a thought anywhere, pick up either of my iOS devices, tap the button and start writing right away. There's no file new, there's no setup, there's no choosing templates, you just type. And then you put it down, and if you're not studying, you think something else, you pick it up, you start typing again. You've got a new document already created for you. Now, the speed of doing that is what I like. Just the pleasure, the indefinable pleasure of writing it is what I like. What they've added in this 4.6 version is like a dark mode. So I've just, instead of black and white, I've been using white on black, and I just really like it. I actually find it slightly hard to find. In Drafts 4, as neat as the design is, you do have to tap to get rid of a bar at the bottom of the app, and then you get the settings icon behind that. Within settings and fonts and things, I then found this, and I've also been playing with different fonts for it and stuff. Utterly pointless, really. It's just the appearance of it. Nothing has functionally changed. I just love it. except nothing's functionally changed. 1,000,000 things. All right, that's too much. Call it 1,000 things have changed on the action side. For the other half of Drafts 4, the side that sensible, clever people are interested in are how it deals with the text you've written when you've finished. You can do nothing, if you like, just pile up documents in it, or you can say, right, actually, that's a good draft of an email. I'll email it to somebody. You can send it as a text message. You can do complicated things where you tap a button in it and it goes off to the web and finds something and brings it back and inserts it into your text. I use some of this in some of my writing, and it's just crazy magic talk. You press this button and this thing happens. But it's crazy magic talk that I swear to you, I can't work out how I did it. And I'm finding it slightly complicated to use all these actions. But I look at all the tantalizing new ways you have of handling Box.com. It's already been doing Dropbox, but now it does Box.com. It can open files, create files, add things. It can send things to Safari. It can send things to its own web browser. It can expand text expander snippets in the middle of a document for you. It just goes on. And now with version 4.6, it goes on and on further. I'm thinking now, looking at this list, having played with this for about a week, I wish I could take some time off, purely enjoy exploring all this can do. And I know that over the next few months before 4.7 or 5 or whatever comes out, all of these things will have become absorbed and become normal parts of what I do every day with Drafts. And that's the thing with Drafts. It's my app of the week, and I use it every day.
Well, that just about wraps it up for episode 54 of the MacNN podcast. My God, 54 of these. It's amazing.
Yeah, join us for 55, where we talk about Apple versus the FBI and encryption.
Oh, also the topic of episode 56, 57, 58. We will struggle each week to find something else besides that to talk about.
Yeah, there's no struggling. I mean, there's enough other stuff to talk about. It's just, this is still the very genesis of this. And like any house, you need to build a solid foundation first. So that reminds me, we have updated the Where Are We Now?
Yes, yeah.
To cover what's happened this week. And that's not going to be every week. It's just as the news comes hot and heavy, we're going to do it at the end of the week. So it'll sit at the top of the page for the weekend. But do take a look at that. If you haven't had a chance to look at everything else that's happened in any detail, do take a look at that. It'll get you up to speed.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are links inside the articles that will take you back to our previous reporting and other people's previous reportings. So it's definitely a great way to catch up quick. Last but not least, we wanted to say thank you for listening. As always, as I mentioned, more news just keeps happening. So we will continue to cover it over on MacNN.com. I'm Charles Martin, the editor of said entity. That's managing editor Mike over there.
Oh, I need to say something now? Yes, I am managing editor Mike, and again, thank you for listening.
Yes. Just not hello.
Hello.
And we haven't done the goodbye yet, so don't do that either.
Yes, I know.
Is your bunker now secured?
I guess I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. I am as secure as I always am.
This is the thing, is you are right there at ground zero.
I know. The thought has occurred to me.
Yeah, well, there you go.
It always gets so interesting around election season around here.
In any event, thank you very much for listening as always. We will see you next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Goodbye.